Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, February the 15th, 2024. Today I want to talk about the comet and minor planet Chiron. There has been this conjunction between Chiron and the North Node that has been forming in Aries, and having looked at the comments on my recent videos, people have been mentioning it quite a bit, and so I thought I would look at Chiron. Specifically, what does it mean to have this Chiron conjunct the North Node? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a number of charts with people who have Chiron conjunct the North Node. And I'm also going to look at charts of people who have got reasonably prominent Chirons. I think this is because I want to sort of look at the tension between these two possible meanings of Chiron. The standard meaning of Chiron, that it is the wounded healer. Chiron was a centaur, and he was immortal. So I think he was half man, half horse. But yes, he was immortal, and he was a healer. But he was hurt by Hercules' arrows, I think, and these arrows had been dipped in the poison of the Hydra. And so the poison of a Hydra was so toxic that you could never be healed from it. Yet Chiron was immortal, so he was always wounded, but he was the healer. That is one myth. Another approach to Chiron, which I think it was some astrologer who I think was writing in the 1980s. Maybe later, I think what was written in the 80s, but they described it as a maverick. So a maverick, I think, is literally a horse, which is sort of quite wild, and so that represents a possible alternative view of Chiron. Chiron does things differently. Chiron may even be the rebel, or perhaps the revolutionary even. And so I want to consider those two possibilities. I think that there are problems with Chiron as a wounded healer. You go on and on about the wounded healer, but do you really want to constantly worry about being a wounded healer? I mean, is it that flattering to always be the wounded healer? Isn't it better to be a rebel? So that tension is something I'm going to look at in this video. But first, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, February the 15th, 2024. So top right, by the way, three people who've got Chiron conjunct the North Node, who I will be talking about later. Joe Biden, the US president, he's got Chiron conjunct the North Node. We've also got George Harrison, the Beatle, has got Chiron conjunct the North Node. And also Andreas Baader, the infamous German terrorist who committed suicide, although some say he was murdered, on October the 18th, 1977, which was actually only less than a fortnight before Chiron was discovered. Chiron was discovered on November the 1st, 1977, apparently just before 10 o'clock in the morning in Pasadena, California. I'm not quite sure how that works, and what the process is of discovering planets, how you can do it by daylight. I just don't know how it works technically. But yes, Andreas Baader was born just before Chiron's discovery, and his Chiron in many respects is quite prominent. Okay, so the broad themes for today. the moon is still in Taurus. And I think that the moon is in a better position today than it was yesterday. And I think when I was talking about the astrology for yesterday, which was of course Valentine's Day, I was sort of mentioning that the moon was a bit problematic because the moon was it was making squares to Mars and Pluto. Now it's moved on, and you can see that the moon is conjunct Jupiter and is conjunct Uranus. In fact, it's fairly close to the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint at noon on February the 15th, 2024 in New York. So moon in Taurus, it is exalted in this sign. And it is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Moon-Jupiter conjunctions are really one of the best aspects in the book. They are fortunate. Things work when Moon and Jupiter conjunct each other. There's a general sense of optimism and happiness, a feeling that things can go right. Though this is a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. It's not as crazy as, say, a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in, say, Sagittarius. It's more staid, but it's still comfortable. Yeah, and it is comfortable having this Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. We can stabilize things, and we might be optimistic, and we can bring this optimism down to earth. And yes, make the world a better place. However, the moon isn't just conjunct Jupiter, it is conjunct Uranus. So moon conjunct Uranus is a bit different from moon conjunct Jupiter. Moon conjunct Uranus is a bit crazy. It wants action. Maybe it's a bit of a revolutionary there. Moon-Uranus conjunction. It's stubborn, though, because Moon and Uranus are in Taurus. It's a fixed sign. It's not a time when people are going to be too happy about compromising. So if we want to be a rebel, we're going to want to stick to our program. And if people try to stop us doing what we want to do, we might not appreciate that, and we might explode. And the moon is square Mercury. So moon square Mercury does provide a bit of extra tension there, because it's a square aspect. Squares can be tense. And the moon and Mercury are the two communication planets. The moon is more about sort of emotional communication. Mercury is about sort of mental, intellectual communication. So there's a clash between the two. We want to communicate, but how do we communicate? What is the appropriate way of communicating? If we just communicate with our emotions, what's on our mind, that might not be great. We have to kind of get the balance right. We have to use our words. Well, think about what happens before we speak. We kind of have to filter out some of our anger, maybe, and communicate in a way that is relatively smooth. But Mercury in Aquarius is a very stubborn placement for Mercury. Mercury has ideas, and we can be very attached to ideas. So we still have to be careful what we say, unless we feel that we have to say it and we're prepared to deal with the consequences. One other aspect that's going on today is a semi-sextile aspect between the Sun and Neptune. There you can see the Sun is at around 26:30 Aquarius, Neptune around 26:14 Pisces. So Sun, Neptune exactly 30 degrees apart. Now, some astrology books will say that the semi-sextile is a fortunate aspect. I would disagree. Semi-sextiles are not fortunate. How can they be fortunate? You're dealing with two planets that are in signs that are right next to each other. And signs that are right next to each other tend to be very different. Sun in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces. Aquarius and Pisces are very different signs. And so, Sun in Aquarius, you think about it, that's logical Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign. It's not going to be moved by emotional considerations. It's going to do the rational thing. Yet, it is trying to square emotional inputs, Neptune, the chaos of Neptune, the deception of Neptune. We might think we're being logical. We might think that we're sticking to the facts, but maybe we're not. Maybe we're a lot more subjective than we think we are. And this applies when we're evaluating other people. So if someone is using clever arguments and is perhaps claiming to have some sort of intellectual high ground, don't necessarily believe them. They've got an emotional agenda. However logical they might sound, what they're saying might be influenced by their environment, it might be influenced by their prejudices, it might be influenced by, events in their childhood. So don't buy the idea that anyone is 100% logical. There's always an emotional agenda. So that is the broad picture for today. I would have said that it's not particularly exciting. I mean, there's not a lot going on. Okay, I suppose I have to say that Jupiter is aspecting the Venus-Uranus midpoint. That actually is a little bit exciting. Jupiter on a Venus-Uranus midpoint. Venus-Uranus is about sudden meetings. In relationships, perhaps sudden events in relationships. Probably fortunate events in relationships, particularly as Jupiter is on a Venus-Uranus midpoint. So consider the possibility that there might be something unexpected regarding people and relationships, maybe money as well, because Venus is the ruler of money. So that Jupiter on a Venus-Uranus midpoint does provide a little bit of optimism. Okay, let me just tell you what Witte and his colleagues said about Jupiter on a Venus-Uranus midpoint. They say, suddenly manifested love connected with happiness. There. Can't get better than that, can you? So, from Witte's perspective, suddenly manifested love, a sudden meeting and sudden happiness. So, there's a bit of spice for you there. But overall, I don't think this is a particularly exciting day. And that may be reflected in what I say for the 12 signs. Okay, so I'm now going to do my forecasts for today. These are my forecasts for today, which is Thursday, February the 15th, 2024. Aries, you continue to be quite focused on what you have. What you have does matter to you. And you shouldn't be ashamed about that. I know that many Arieses think that they are way beyond material concerns. I mean, you've got other things to worry about, other things to do, and having to deal with money is just absolutely tedious as far as you're concerned. But today, it is worth your while. You can actually do things today to improve your financial well-being. I mean, after all, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in a sector of your chart which is associated with finance. So when you look at your finances, when you look at your income, when you look at how much money you've got in the bank, consider the possibility that it could be better and can be better. So Taurus, what can you do about that? Maybe you have to be a little boring. not all day long necessarily, just giving a little time to something of a financial nature, just a bit of your time. I mean, I know you've got a busy schedule, but just a little bit of time on a financial aspect of your life could be time well spent. Yet money could be also an irritation. I mean, after all, the moon is making a square to Mercury. When you're with other people, talking to other people, if the issue of money does come up, there may be almost immediate disagreements. And as people talk about money, it'll be quite clear that things aren't going in the right direction. And, there could be arguments. So maybe, Taurus, you should be thinking about money today, but maybe you should be thinking about money in quite a private way. You don't have to be open about your views on money. You know what needs to be done, and you can just go and do it. On the other hand, I'm not saying that today you need to just disappear and keep a low profile, that kind of thing, because there is evidence that you can actually be very dynamic. And perhaps this has nothing to do with money. It's just what you want to do in your life. There is scope, Aries, for one piece of very fortunate action. Action which is sudden, perhaps unexpected. No one's prepared for it. It just happens. And when you do it, you'll be fairly sure of yourself. It's to do with the Aries intuition. I mean, Aries is a very intuitive sign. Aries doesn't just kind of work out what's right. Aries just knows what's right. You just will know what needs to be done. And there will be that moment today when you really do know what needs to be done. So don't lose that moment. You're an Aries. I think you'll be very aware of what that moment actually is. Looking at relationships, I said yesterday that, and I think the day before that Venus is the planet ruling your opposite sign, and your opposite sign is Libra. Venus is now really close to changing sign. It's right at the end of Capricorn. And this says something about the people close to you. They really are close to making a change. They're perhaps moving from a place where they're over-concerned about material details, over-concerned about sort of money and other irrelevances, because it's not an irrelevance really, and they're going to be more they're going to become more inspirational and more interesting. And perhaps you need to just let this change work through. Let the people close to you work things out in their own way without interfering. And you certainly shouldn't be talking to them about money, because I don't think that's going to help. Having said that, you don't really know fully what other people are thinking, and I think that the people closest to you, what they actually really want at the moment, they want closer ties. They want union. They want a sense of community. They want a sense of being part of something, whether that's being part of a relationship, part of a group, part of society. They want to be part of it, part of something, and they want it to happen quickly. And so perhaps, Aries, that's something that you can facilitate. Taurus. Today, there is a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter in your star sign. I think this is good news. As I said earlier in the video, the Moon-Jupiter conjunction is one of the most fortunate aspects in the book. It's lucky, it's optimistic, and being in Taurus in your star sign, it's kind of stabilizing. So at the moment, Taurus, Jupiter has been moving through your star sign for some time. You do have a fundamental optimism. You believe that of all the possible things that can happen, the best thing is going to happen. That's what you believe. And you're entitled to have that belief. And today, with the Moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, that optimism is in many respects going to be vindicated. You can make small changes, lots of small changes, and those changes can make the world around you sort of more stable. Though I don't think we're talking about anything too boring, because the Moon doesn't just make a conjunction to Jupiter, it also makes a conjunction to Uranus. There are certainly things you want. There are things you want other people to do, and there you have an idea about what the perfect world is. And in that sense, you may feel that there's a certain need for a bit of a revolution. In that Taurean way, Taurean revolutions, they start slow. The results may not be immediately obvious. But once a revolution starts, it doesn't change. We don't go back to the status quo, or whatever the status quo ante bellum, the status quo before the war. We don't do that. We keep moving and we keep changing. So the revolution that you're thinking about, Taurus, it's a kind of a slow motion revolution, but a revolution that there's no danger of a counter revolution. It just keeps going. Now, Taurus, you perhaps have to appreciate that not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to have the same view of the world as you. I mean, after all, the Moon, while moving through Taurus, which is your sign, it makes a square to Mercury. Moon square Mercury might be a disagreement. It's about something verbal, possibly relating to your workplace. So if you're going into work and you're having conversations about your view of the world and how you think things should be organized, don't be surprised if someone disagrees with you. Don't be surprised if there's an animated conversation or which becomes an animated argument, and a kind of argument where it's just very difficult for people to back down. So be prepared for that argument. I don't think it's right for you to compromise, but at the same time, I don't think it's right for you to just keep arguing and in such a way that you destroy your own position. So somehow you've got to find a way through. And as I was saying to Aries, if you've got an argument coming up, maybe you want to just avoid the argument. You just want to just get on with it. You've got you've got your own private revolution that you want to enact. Maybe in a first instance you don't need other people's help. Maybe you can just go and do it without advertising the fact. But yes, stubbornness in terms of in terms of having conversations with other people. If you are too stubborn, I'm not sure about that. I think that could spoil things. Now, another thing to point out is that Venus is your ruling planet, and Venus is in the absolute last degree, last few minutes almost of the sign Capricorn. Venus is about to change. And because Venus is your ruler and it is about to change, there is a certain sense in which you don't have all the facts. You're not absolutely sure what you want. And that would mean, in terms of, the arguments I was just talking about, maybe you shouldn't go particularly crazy on pushing something through today, because you don't know everything. And tomorrow things might be a lot clearer. So perhaps you should pause and just observe for a little. I mean, I don't say you have to be in complete observer mode all day long, but just bear in mind that there are still things that you are learning about and that you do need to consider. Looking at relationships, the moon is in Taurus and it's conjunct Jupiter. I mean, that in itself is good for relationships. It means you are a stabilizing influence. So if someone is feeling unsure of themselves, they're worried, they're hurting, then you're just the person to stabilize them. And, there'll be something about you that's incredibly reassuring. And I think that is going to be very helpful in terms of perhaps creating new relationships and stabilizing existing relationships. At the same time, there are going to be some people who you have to deal with who are quite action-oriented. They want things done, and they want things done suddenly. And that may be something you need to respect. So if someone close to you just says they want something done, they want action now, this minute, don't just drag your heels for the sake of it. Consider what they're asking. Consider their impatience. Maybe they're right to be impatient. And so, if that is the case, then maybe you need to facilitate whatever they're asking for, and you need to be prepared for it. Because Taurians can just be a bit slow. They like things done in a particular way, and then suddenly someone comes in with a sudden demand, or they express a sudden wish, and it's not something you plan for. You might just be confused, and your first instinct will be to say no way. But I think in this situation you do need a little bit of flexibility. But that is just a possibility. I mean, I think broad picture is, Taurus, that today you are a stabilizing influence. Gemini. I think that Geminis are not going to fully be in the mood for dealing with other people. Not really. The moon is in Taurus, and from a Gemini perspective, Taurus is the sign. Taurus is the sign before Gemini, and this means that it's a time when your energies are kind of focused on your own private world and on your own private concerns and your beliefs about the world, and you're processing it all, and you're not really in the mood for accommodating other people because your mind is going somewhere else. Now, that kind of approach, that sort of introspective approach, tends not to be popular, tends not to be desirable. But right now, I think it is appropriate, Gemini, because there are things that you do need to work through, and I think you may also be easy to annoy. That's because there is a square aspect between the moon and Mercury, and of course Mercury is your ruling planet, and so that moon square Mercury means that you're in this space, you're you're working things through in your own way, in your space, and then someone sort of comes in and asks you something or tells you to do something, and you just get annoyed. It's just not what you want to do. I mean, this person might be someone you really care about, someone you don't want to upset, but your reaction might be a bit rude. You might just say something unfortunate because your little space, your little world is being disturbed, and it's aggravating. And of course, Geminis are a very verbal sign. Geminis are always quite capable of being rude. So if that happens, if you find your peace being disturbed, don't say the first thing that comes into your head, because the first thing that comes into your head is probably not going to be the right thing. It's just going to cause problems. Just try to be accommodating if you possibly can. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Gemini, it needn't be too bad. If you can just be sort of relaxed, not think too much. I mean, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Now, it may be in a fairly introspective sector of your chart, but Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is your opposite sign, and Sagittarius in the Gemini chart does have a special link with relationships. So there is one person out there who likes you, who is on your side, even if you don't recognize this point. And it may be, if you feel that someone is disturbing your peace of mind, it may be they're trying to help. It may be they're trying to offer you something. So always consider what someone has got to say. Let them finish. Even if you don't really want to hear what they've got to say, let them finish. Once they've finished, you might have a different view of the matter. But in terms of relationships which perhaps are with people you don't know, you do need to be a bit careful, because today there is a possibility of getting confused in relationships, getting the wrong idea about the way relationships should be, getting the wrong idea about what kind of relationship you should be having with certain people. And that confusion, I think, is more about people you don't really know well. And I think you're actually aware of that possibility of confusion. And I think that may be one of the reasons why you think it might be better to be a little withdrawn, a little isolated. So I think it's okay to have a fairly isolated approach in most situations. But when you're dealing with people you really know and trust, then I don't think there's a problem. The people you know and trust, they wish the best for you, and you need to give them the space they deserve. Cancer. The moon is your ruler, and the moon is conjunct Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of good fortune. That means it should be a day when things really work out for you. You're going to be a nice person. I mean, that's how you will occur to people in most cases. And I think that you'll be prepared to make space for people, particularly loved ones, but other people in general. You are quite a nurturing force. I mean, you are anyway. I mean, the sign Cancer is about nurturing. But with the moon in Taurus, you're saying in Taurus. Remember, the moon is exalted in Taurus, and it's conjunct Jupiter. With the moon, with this Moon Jupiter conjunction, you're not just going to be nurturing, but you're going to be optimistic. And I think you're going to be able to not just listen to people, but feed back to them all the possibilities that can happen, that can happen in their lives. I'm talking about fortunate possibilities. So you can build people up, and you shouldn't worry about putting yourself in sort of second place. It's okay to focus just on one person and not talk too much about yourself, because in that way you'll be bolstering yourself. You'll be boosting your reputation. You'll be giving the impression that you're someone that can be trusted. And if people trust you, then the sky's the limit. I mean, that's the foundation for everything. So, whatever your activities today, trust. Think about trust. Think about what it means to be trusted, and think about all the things you can achieve when you are trusted. And so those things, okay, you might not achieve them today, but today you can build trust. And because of that, you can really be putting yourself in a good position. I should say, though, the moon is not just making a conjunction to Jupiter, it is also making a conjunction to Uranus. In fact, the moon is sort of on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. And that moon on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint may be about a feeling of optimism, a feeling that some of your worries from the past are starting to slip away. You can see that things really aren't as bad as you'd thought, that there's actually genuine cause for optimism, and you may start to realize that something that had been holding you back is now beginning to dissipate. The concrete blocks are beginning to dissolve. And with the moon moving to a conjunction of Uranus, this means that you can create change. I don't think you're going to be creating change through a revolution. I mean, I know one associates Uranus with revolutions, but you don't have to go that far. It's one step before a revolution. You want things to happen, but you also don't want to cause upset. And I think that balance is great. And by being firm, but also being sensitive, Cancer, you can create the changes that are really very important to you. Will you get total agreement all the way through? No, not necessarily. The moon does make a square to Mercury. Moon square Mercury may represent a heated discussion, but it won't be too heated. I think people will stick to the facts. And it's just very important, if you are in a situation where someone disagrees with you, that you respond in the right way. You know, Cancerians can be a bit difficult when they come across a disagreement. They may just take it personally. So if you do get involved in a situation where you're disagreeing with someone, don't take it personally. I mean, I know your inclination will be to take it personally. And your inclination will be to close the argument down, saying you're not going to discuss it. You're not going to get involved. While you don't want to be drawn into a long argument, you don't want to close an argument down early and just refuse to discuss it, because, remember, today is all about trust. People want to trust you. They don't want that moodiness and temperamentality that unfortunately is one of the sort of negative traits of Cancer. They don't want to see that, and so somehow you've got to get the balance right. But I'm sure you can. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Finishing up with relationships, there is this Moon Jupiter conjunction, the Moon is your ruler, it's conjunct Jupiter. That in itself should make relationships work. But with that Moon square Uranus, you don't want to talk too much, particularly about things that are complicated, whether they are emotionally complicated. Now, I'm not saying you can't be emotional. In fact, you must be emotional. That's how you work best. But you don't want to talk about complicated emotions. They can be left until later. You don't want to talk about money. You don't want to talk about complicated money. Even if money has to be talked about, maybe you can talk about it tomorrow. Maybe that's not something you should talk about. So by keeping things relatively simple, I think that you can certainly facilitate relationships, and I think you and someone else can get closer together. But again, you need to understand that different people have different approaches. It is possible that someone close to you has very clear views about authority, how they want to assert their authority. And that might sound a bit strange. It might just not be in keeping with how you're feeling. But maybe you need to respect that. If someone wants to talk about their authority, if they want to make it very clear that they are an authority, they might also be talking about their concerns about authority. A lot of people are concerned about authority and inappropriate use of authority, for example, by governments. And you might be asking, well, what's that got to do with relationships? Well, I don't know. It might have something to do with relationships, because you might find that someone close to you has got a lot of things they're concerned about in terms of a world at large. Conspiracy theories, possibly. I don't know. But you'll work it out. Leo. It's a bit of a mixed day, where I think a certain amount of caution is required. Now, on a positive note, you are clearly able to make a name for yourself. You have, clear ideas about what you want, especially in terms of, career, your direction in life, what you want to do. And I think actually you're going to have a certain amount of luck in this direction. I mean, after all, the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter in Taurus, which from your perspective is a sort of very high profile, career-oriented sector of your chart. So that moon conjunct Jupiter in Taurus is going to allow you to make a name for yourself, and your optimism about your future direction is in many respects going to be vindicated. So if you want to pour a huge amount of energy into your working life, into career, into business, then that is good, and I think that you can really achieve something very, very useful today. And you may even find that something that had been blocking you recently, and something that had been really worrying you, the block may just suddenly go. You might suddenly find that you've got the freedom to do what you need to do. So that's good. But I think on the way, there could be some disagreements. The moon is in Taurus. It's making a square to Mercury. And Mercury is in Aquarius, your opposite sign. And so that it can be about arguments with someone, with a partner, with someone close to you, someone with an enemy, an argument with another person, a heated discussion. it could be a heated discussion. It needn't be a heated discussion. Mercury's in Aquarius. If you run into arguments about what you're trying to do at work, got to keep it logical. You've got to stick to the facts. You've got to stick to your principles, but you've also got to stick to your facts. And you've got to have the ability to argue. Being able to argue is not about getting angry. It's about just playing with the facts. And perhaps what it's all about really is demonstrating to someone that you're prepared to listen. You don't have to concede anything. You just have to show that you're ready to listen. Now, another aspect happening today is a semi-sextile between the Sun and Neptune. So the Sun is your ruler, and it's semi-sextile Neptune. Neptune is the planet of confusion and deception and misunderstandings. So, Leo, you might be very sure of yourself. You might be very certain about the way things should be done, but don't be too certain, because the Sun is semi-sextile Neptune. On a key point, you may have made a fundamental misunderstanding. I suspect that this misunderstanding has an emotional basis. There's something subjective that you want, that you feel, maybe relating to your past. Maybe this has happened before, decades ago, and it feels that the situation is repeating, and you've just made some assumptions based on which are fundamentally based on emotions. Okay, it could be based on deception. Maybe someone has persuaded you to do something, or persuaded you that a particular point of view is correct, and maybe you were wrong to agree with them. So just consider the possibility, Leo, that you've got something wrong and there's a misunderstanding there. Because if you don't consider that possibility, you could really trip yourself up. Finishing with relationships, it's a time where relationships are difficult to avoid. The Sun is still in moving through Aquarius. Okay, the Sun does leave Aquarius quite soon, but it's still there, and Aquarius is your opposite sign, so you do have to consider other people. And I think in terms of relationships, it's really important you don't make assumptions about another person. Don't make assumptions about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they like, what they dislike. You've got to give the thing time. I think that is really important. And with that Moon square Mercury, which I suggest that might be quite argumentative. It might have an influence which goes beyond career and work. It might actually affect relationships. That is, you don't want to get involved in an argument, and I've talked about this before. You've got to be, okay, you can be involved in an argument provided it's light, provided it's not a big matter of ego. The situation with relationships is kind of mixed. I mean, relationships, sure, they're important, but I think there is plenty of scope for you to mismanage relationships. But, I've given you the warning. I think I've explained what you need to do. I don't see any reason why you should mismanage relationships, provided you act appropriately. Virgo. Virgo, it's another day when you don't want to be too caught up in minutiae. If possible, Virgo, you want to be able to see the bigger picture. If you're stuck with minutiae, then you're going to waste a lot of time and you're going to waste a lot of energy. Especially today, when the Moon is making a square aspect to Mercury. The Moon-Mercury aspect, it is about communication, but it's also about thought. and it's the way you're thinking. And so with Moon square Mercury, there might be some frantic thinking about things, and you can't help thinking, and you keep thinking the same thing. You keep going round and round in circles, but you think the same thing, and your thoughts may not be helpful. Through thinking, you may destroy your own inner harmony. You're trying to be expansive, you're trying to see the world in all its multiplicity, and then you just keep thinking about stuff that is really tedious, and you notice the details. You're trying to have a wonderful spiritual experience, becoming one with the universe, and then you notice something really stupid, like a crack in the ceiling or a speck of dirt somewhere, and that just spoils everything. Or you might question, you're talking to someone and you're with someone and it's going well, and it's elevating, and then you notice something ridiculous about their appearance or something like that. Just that sense of detail could just be really destructive, and it might actually stop you getting where you need to go. And today, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in a really expansive part of your chart. It's in Taurus. Taurus is, for Virgos, is a very spiritual sign. It's an earthy sign, but it's, the earth is about, if you think about the raw earth and you think about touching the raw earth, it's dirty. It gets under your fingernails, but it's real, and at the same time, it is fundamentally spiritual, and perhaps that's what you need to realize. Getting into the ground where there's, they say, where there's muck, there's brass, but also perhaps where there's muck, there's God. I don't know, is that an American phrase? I don't know. I think that's more of a British phrase. Where there's muck, there's brass. That's where there's garbage. That's where the money is. But also where there's garbage, that's where God is. And perhaps, Virgo, you need to recognize that. And if you can recognize that, and if you can get into the grittiness and imperfections of the sign Taurus, then, Virgo, I think you're going to have a great sense of who you are and where you're going. And you can move beyond material details and start to get a real sense of oneness. As in terms of relationships, Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, and Pisces is your opposite sign. And today there's a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. So this does mean that there are people out there who you can get close to, who you can really enjoy their company. And Moon Jupiter in conjunction in Taurus, there's a certain sensuality there, if that's appropriate, if that's what you want. So relationships can work well, provided you don't spoil it by just getting sidetracked by stupid details. Libra, you are still in quite a serious mood. I think you were in quite a serious mood yesterday, and I think you're in a serious mood today. But when I say you're in a serious mood, I don't mean it in a bad sense. I think it's great you're in a serious mood. Sometimes Librans need a bit of seriousness. Librans can be sometimes just a little too light. They can get obsessed by trivialities, surface details, but not today. Today, Libra, you're starting to really understand what is important. You also have a sense of change. You can feel one thing is coming to an end and another thing is starting. And so that adds to your seriousness. And I think you recognize that now is not a time where you're going to really understand everything. You can't understand everything because you don't have all the facts. But soon enough, Libra, you will have the facts. And so I think if you find that you're battening down the hatches and you're closing down communications with certain people, certain situations, then I think actually that might be the right thing to do. Just don't do it for too long. But today, that really might be the right approach. At the same time, you are a Libran, and as a Libran, you realize that you're not alone. You can't be alone. You do need to have contact with the world around you, and in fact, I think that is something that you're thinking about. And I think that you need to be open-minded about your contacts with the world around you, because there may be a sudden opportunity to form a new relationship or to get close to someone. Or it may not just be one person. It may be getting involved in a group, a society, something like that. But the opportunity will be quite unexpected. So be open to that possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could happen. So don't take the world so seriously that you ignore a major opportunity, because there is a major opportunity which could come your way to get in touch with someone. Now, the Moon-Jupiter conjunction is in Taurus. Now, Taurus is an Earth sign, and the sign Taurus is often connected with money, and I think, Libra, there may be some useful work you can do in a financial sense. And this might be about getting involved with things that you don't normally want to get involved with. It's just too complicated. You'd perhaps expect someone else to get involved with it. But if you yourself can get involved with something complicated of a financial nature, then you might be surprised what happens. It might take you time, it might take you a lot of concentration, but you might discover some important things about your finances and other people's finances and the way money is being organized. And as a result of these realizations, you're in a position to take fortunate action because you'll have the knowledge, and it's all about knowledge. And so today you can gain a much better understanding of your material reality and your financial situation and your financial prospects. And okay, the worst that can happen is you might realize that things aren't as good as you thought they were, but that's good because you're now in a position to take action. So yes, Libra, don't ignore money. You do need to focus on money, and I think money is an area where you can make good progress. Scorpio. So this week has been dominated by a conjunction between Mars and Pluto. And yeah, it's true that this Mars-Pluto conjunction is starting to break up, but Mars and Pluto are still very close to one another. So you're still feeling its influence. I think that you're very focused still on yourself and on your power and what you can achieve and what you cannot achieve, and what your goals are. And yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be something that is very important to you. But where do you fire the laser beam? I've associated the Mars-Pluto conjunction with being a bit of a laser beam. And there's some danger, if you imagine, I don't know, a laser beam like some sort of science fiction gun, but there's a danger that the gun is pointed downwards. You're lasering the ground. The ground, you can't do anything with that. You could waste a lot of energy on just nothing, just completely focusing on something which is totally meaningless. You can laser the raw earth as long as you like. Nothing much is going to happen. You just make a hole. That's all that's going to happen. So Scorpio, I think direction is going to be quite important today. It's true, Scorpio, that a lot of your energies are going to go into grounding yourself, and that's great. But if you spend too much time trying to ground yourself, as I said, you'll just be digging a hole. And that's not what you want to do. You do at some stage need to consider other things. Especially today. There is a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. Taurus is your opposite sign. In astrology, the opposite sign is often associated with relationships, with the other. And that's certainly something you do need to consider. You might like to be in control all the time, but this is a time where there are forces out there which are having an influence on you. You might not like it, but it's true. So Scorpio, make some accommodation there. See what people have got to say. Listen to them. Now, I think, Scorpio, you may have an inclination just not to listen to them at all, or to argue back, or to tell them they're wrong. Okay, but I don't think that's the right approach. Give people the freedom to say what's on their mind, to express themselves. And you will then be putting yourself in a position where you can actually benefit. See what people have got to offer. Right now there are some very generous people around you. You might not recognize this, but they're there. And so perhaps, Scorpio, you need to put yourself in a position where you can take advantage of that generosity. But, I'm not saying, Scorpio, that you need to be passive today. There is evidence, I've already talked about the Mars-Pluto conjunction, but there are other things going on which indicate that you're able, when you want to be able to put your power into definite areas with great success. You can really create fortunate change by applying actually quite a lot of force, but I don't mean that in a violent sense. Your force and dynamism can be applied in a particular area, and you can get amazing results, but you just have to choose the right place. As I said, you don't want to be digging a hole in the ground. That's not what it's about. It's about suddenly realizing that you have an opportunity to do something, and then just doing it. So that's about it, Scorpio. So what I'm really saying is you do have a lot of power today, a lot of power, but it's really important you use that you use that power in the right way. Yes, you've got to ground yourself, but you don't want to ground yourself too much. And at the same time, you do have to consider what other people have got to offer, because I think they've got a lot to offer. Sagittarius, you, in some respects, are very fortunate today. That's because the lightness of Sagittarius is finding its way through. Yes, things are a bit heavy in some respects, But the fortune is about being able to take a situation which seems a little tedious, a little boring, and being able to transform it. Your basic joy, the basic joy that comes with being a Sagittarius, just can't be hidden. It just comes out just naturally, and I think that other people are really going to appreciate that. And matters are helped by the fact that there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruling planet, and it's conjunct the Moon. So you can certainly make the world a better place today, no doubt about that. But as I think I was saying yesterday, a bit of discipline is in order here. I don't think we want to see chaos today. We don't want to see things going all over the place, not people not being sure what to do, you not being sure what to do, scattering your energy. We don't want to have that. We do not want to have scattered energy today, Sagittarius. That would be so inappropriate. And I think, Sagittarius, it would help if you had some basic plan. I know you don't like plans too much, although it should be said, I mean, if you look at it from a sort of military perspective, some of the best generals that ever lived were Sagittarians. Did you know that? Some really great military generals had their sons in Sagittarius, but that means that was because they just had a general knowledge. They had a knowledge that what they were doing was right. They could quickly make up their mind. So there was a kind of a plan. So that plan, the kind of plan we're talking about is not a plan necessarily where you sort of sit down and you work it out in paper, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. It's just an intuitive plan, just a general feeling about the way the day should pan out, and you may be able to get that plan straight away in a split second. But nonetheless, a plan would help, because a plan provides it provides you with a structure, so you know what you're going to be doing at particular times of day. And when I say know, I mean know, not believe, not hope. I mean know. You know what you're going to be doing at particular times of day, and if you with that knowledge, you'll know that you're always doing the right thing. Your optimism. You are an optimistic sign, and your optimism will have a structure. You won't just tell yourself and other people that everything's going to be fine, everything will work out. You'll actually be able to tell them how and why it's going to work out. And you'll be able to explain why it's going to work out. Now, I suppose I should say something about relationships. Relationships could be a bit tricky. There is a square aspect between the Moon and Mercury. Mercury is your relationship ruler because it rules Gemini. I think you may find that another person is just raising these boring objections, talking too much, and you could find that quite irritating. And at the same time, you may recognize that although the person talking sounds reasonable, you know that person is fundamentally confused. They don't really know what they're talking about. So you have to decide how best to deal with it. I think, the more talking there is, I think the more it's going to be difficult to relate. So I don't know what you do. Do you try to close the conversation down? Do you try to change the subject? but maybe once a conversation starts, it's difficult to stop. So perhaps that gives you an early warning about, what is the right relationship and a wrong relationship. And maybe in terms of relationships, you should simply avoid people who talk too much. Capricorn. It's going to be a day when you have real optimism. When you can really see that things can work out. After all, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in Taurus, and from a Capricorn perspective, Taurus has a natural affinity with your star sign. You can feel that affinity. It's about earthiness. It's about just knowing what's right, knowing what's going to happen, and just when I say optimism, I'm not saying you have to make huge promises, that you have to be optimistic about winning a lottery. It's just optimistic about the general flow of life. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about knowing that life is going in the right direction. And in the process, it's very important, Capricorn, to be able to harness your talents. Those talents need to be harnessed today. That's far more important than, I don't know, getting on with other people, for example, or being friends with anyone. It's harnessing your talents. But the people in your life who matter will appreciate you. I mean, if they don't appreciate you, then they don't matter. So those close to you should be on your wavelength. I mean, from a Capricorn perspective, Cancer is the opposite sign to Capricorn, and the ruler of Cancer is the Moon, and the Moon is in Taurus, and the Moon is exalted in Taurus, and the Taurus is a sign that is concordant with your own star sign. So, or star sign, ascendant sign, moon sign, however you're looking at this forecast, because as I said, I do understand that some people look at it from the perspective of their ascendant, some people from the perspective of their moon sign, and of course some people from the perspective of their sun sign or star sign. So yes, the right people understand you, and you are on the right wavelength. And as I said yesterday, there should be something playful today. The day needn't and shouldn't be serious or too serious. There is a playfulness to the day, which I think you need to take advantage of. Looking at your career and the way you perceive your direction going forward, I think you may be aware here of some change. It's a change where you feel that your priorities need to shift. You may have been very clear about what you want. For example, what kind of work you want to do, how you want your skills to be utilized. But now you're starting to think there's something else that needs to be sorted out, and it may be that you are thinking that maybe the missing thing could be money. It may be, Capricorn, and this is a note for the future. No, it's not. I'm not really talking about today, but it's just that the financial aspect of whatever work you're doing, you're aware that sooner rather than later, it does have to be sorted out, and that is giving you pause for thought, I think, in terms of your work and discussions about money. today. If people are talking about money, if they want to discuss money, I would suggest that those discussions should be postponed. Today is not right. Today is not the right day to be discussing money. Indeed, probably today is not the right day to be discussing anything, because from your perspective right now, discussion is a waste of time because you've got better things to be doing. Aquarius. Today, Aquarius, I think that you should primarily be focused on creating stability for yourself. Now, Aquarians, Aquarius is an air sign. Air signs can sometimes be sort of floating around, thinking, having ideas, and they can sometimes forget about grounding. And today, you can think about it again, because I think today it's a good time for putting down an anchor, for deciding what works for you, deciding what places make you feel comfortable, and then for taking action. So if you have recently felt that things have been a bit rocky and things have, you've had to change your plans too much, change your ideas too much, you've been perhaps concerned about other people being flaky, them changing their plans and messing you around, today is really a day for sort of taking a stand and saying, well, this is where telling yourself that this is where you want to be. And that's okay, because I think you're making the right decision here. It's clear where you need to be. And I think that once you have grounded yourself, once you've decided where you want to be, you will find that your luck improves. You will feel more comfortable, more happy. You'll have a better attitude to the world, and overall life will be better. And today you can see it. You can really see what you can see where you feel comfortable. It makes sense. So do consider that. Perhaps if today, Aquarius, if you're in several different places, ask how you feel in different places. This place, that place. How do you feel? Which of those places do you feel at home? Because of that sensitivity that you will have to comfort, you will realize where that place is that you feel most at home, and that will immediately tell you what you need to be doing in the future. And I think, Aquarius, you're going to be very good at articulating your feelings. So if something isn't right, doesn't feel right, you'll be able to communicate this. Now, for a lot of other signs, if you've been, I hope you haven't been listening to all my signs from Aries through to Aquarius, but if you have been, you might have noticed that I was talking a lot about communications and the difficulties of communication. But I think in your case, talking is the right way. I think that by communicating your likes and dislikes, by communicating what makes you comfortable, what makes you uncomfortable, I think people are going to listen. And the feedback you get might be quite important, because comfort and feeling at home is not just about your physical location, it's about the people you're with. And so consider what kind of conversations you have with people. Does the conversation make you feel good? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? Because conversation is a good way, at least for an Aquarius, at least today, is a good way of finding out about people. Finding out whether people can be trusted or not trusted. And so, yes, I think for you, perhaps, the more talking, the better. And if you have a big argument with someone, that's great, because then you know what kind of person you're dealing with. So that, to my mind, looks good. And also, the moon, which is in Taurus, is making a sextile to Saturn. The moon is, Saturn is your ruling planet, and so the moon is making a sextile to Saturn, and that moon sextile Saturn may actually have some link with money, and I suppose money is part of the security complex, and that sextile between the moon and Saturn may give you insights on how to give yourself financial and material security. So overall, Aquarius, I'm not saying it's going to be an exciting day, but I think it's going to be a useful day, and also a day when you can take real steps to give yourself emotional and material security. Pisces, you benefit, I believe, from a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruling planet. The moon is conjunct Jupiter. That means that you're going to feel comfortable on an emotional level. You'll feel that you understand your world. You're part of the world. Maybe not the whole world, but at least you're part of the world, and that you can interact with this world, talk to this world, even travel around this world, because this world is a small world. It's a world that may be a little patch with a radius of 100 yards, 100 meters. Okay, it could be a mile, a kilometer. But that small world around you is something that you're going to feel comfortable there. And with that comfort, you can give yourself a fair amount of luck. I mean, give yourself luck. Luck is not something that, in this case, is just coming from outside, is dumped upon you. The universe wants you to have a lucky day. It's about giving yourself luck. It's about taking actions which lead to fortunate outcomes, and the actions you take can bring about good fortune. And those actions do not have to be particularly dramatic. Nonetheless, they can be dramatic. I think that today, Pisces, you do have the capacity for creating situations out of nothing, which are actually incredibly exciting, and can be quite fun, and may involve other people. And once you get going, you're going to be an exciting person to have around. And the things you say are going to make a lot of sense. And your popularity ratings should be high. But I'm not talking about popularity, in terms of the wider world necessarily, although that is possible. It's just popularity perhaps within your own community, within your neighborhood. And because today that is what counts. And those people who you see all the time but you never talk to, those people are going to start to appreciate you. So I think that is that's all pretty fortunate. As far as closer relationships are concerned, I think it's possible, but if you get too close to any one person, that might spoil things. Reason being because even if because there are just some people who just seem to have a misunderstanding. Even people who are really close to you, maybe people you're even married to, might have a misunderstanding. They might have strange ideas about what it means to be close to someone, what oneness really means. I know that sounds a bit sort of vague, but I'm talking about something quite passing. But I just feel that on a one-to-one level, the people that are really close to you, they may have some strange ideas, strange thoughts. Their expectations of you might be confused. And that might spoil things. So perhaps today, Pisces, you should think more of the community, more of people in general, rather than one particular person. That is the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at the day from the perspective of the I Ching. I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 49, revolution. And this actually seems to be borne out by the astrology. I mean, I was talking about this quite a lot today for revolution. I mean, not that things are desperately revolutionary, but there is a moon Uranus conjunction today. And I think that many of us are going to realize that a change is required. Now, when we talk about revolution, we have to remember that this is the I Ching talking. The I Ching is philosophically a Confucian way of looking at the world. It's not about destroying things for the sake of it. It's about maintaining structures. It's about maintaining family hierarchies. It's about maintaining social hierarchies. So you only have a revolution because something has to change, because if it doesn't change, the broader structure may be threatened. So that's how you need to see revolution. And I think that we will reach a decision today that there is no choice. Things have reached a stage where a revolution has to happen. Now, that revolution may be in our own home, it may be in our own mind, it may be about how we organize our own lives, it may have nothing to do with other people, it may be a revolution at work. I suppose it could be a revolution in your own country. Do you want to bring the government down? Well, I don't think there are any politicians, government leaders, potential leaders watching this video, so that's probably not going to apply, and I'm certainly not in a position to bring a government down. But something needs to give. But timing is right. Timing has got to be absolutely right. This is especially the case if other people are involved, because very often when you have a revolution, it's not going to just affect you, it's going to affect other people. So if you want to sort out something in your house and you've got family members around, even just one other family member around, they're going to be affected by it. Or certainly at work, people are going to be affected by it. So at the moment, right now, to begin with, you're not strong enough to enact this revolution. But you have to get the balance right. If you try to bring in this revolution too quickly, it will fail. But if you wait for too long, you will miss your moment. So you've got to get the moment absolutely right if you want to bring about this revolution. And then once you've got the revolution going, you have to consider how actually are other people going to respond. I think that people are going to respond to your ideas about change in a way that seems enthusiastic. On the surface, they will be enthusiastic, but deep down, they're not really committed. They're just going through the motions. That doesn't mean to say that you can't have your revolution, but just understand that other people are somewhat half-hearted about it. And so perhaps you can't fully rely on them to see things through. Maybe that means you're going to have to see things through on your own, the important things, the real details about a revolution, because there may not be enough support. Now, this hexagram revolution, it does move. It does move to hexagram number 10, which is treading. Treading means treading on the tiger's tail. You know, the tiger. Imagine there's a big tiger lying in the corridor, and you have to kind of walk past this tiger. And the thing is, what happens if you tread on the tiger's tail? Well, the tiger will bite you. But does it matter if a tiger bites you? It's a difficult situation. You have to tread carefully because we've just come from a hexagram called revolution, and so it's not going to be easy. But it seems we're okay. We're going to be able to we're going to be able to get past this tiger, and even if it does bite us, it's not going to be serious. We'll get through, and so by carefully negotiating the problem, we can bring about our revolution, and we can make the world a better place, or at least we can make our own life better. But okay, there are changes that need to be made. You know what they are, and now it's just a question of getting on and doing it and getting your timing right. Finally, I want to go back to the astrology and I want to talk about Chiron. Chiron is a planet that I have problems with. A minor planet. I'll tell you what my problem with Chiron is. I'll be honest with you. I've discussed this before. I was born with an exact Jupiter-Chiron conjunction. Totally exact. They're in exactly the same place. I cannot distinguish between them. Because of that, I cannot separate Chiron out. So I have no way of knowing in my own chart how Chiron works, because it's all part of Jupiter, because it's so close to Jupiter. And maybe that is a reason why I have been so hostile to Chiron through my whole basic career as an astrologer. I first came across it in the 80s. But that's my problem with Chiron. But nonetheless, I do understand that a lot of people use Chiron. And in this section, I want to just consider Chiron with particular focus on Chiron being conjunct the North Node. So just let's just have a look at a few charts. The first chart I want to look at is the chart for the discovery of Chiron. Chiron was discovered November the 1st, 1977, and this astrologer, I think her name is Zane Stein, I think that's her name. She apparently wrote to the discoverer of Chiron, who was Charles Cowell, asking when was Chiron discovered, and he replied just before 10, and Zane Stein sort of made it 9:56 a.m. So this is a chart for 9:56 a.m. in Pasadena, California, for the discovery of Chiron. I want to make 2 points about this chart. Firstly, Chiron is square Mars. I think that might tell us a lot about Chiron. To me, that's not just the wounded healer. That is about something quite aggressive, assertive about Chiron. Chiron is an assertive energy because Chiron was square Mars at that point of discovery. And Mars was in the 8th house in Leo, so you could say that that's quite intense. Mars is about life and death when it's in the 8th house. There is a sort of awareness that life doesn't go on forever. Mars in Leo in the 8th house, square Chiron. That's the first point. The second point is that Chiron is on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. Now, Mercury-Venus as a pair is about, you see, by the way, there's Venus, there is Mercury. So the midpoint is going to be around 3 degrees Scorpio, about there. In fact, sort of Mars will be on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, and Chiron will be on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. I think that is right. Let me just check that. So, okay, Mars is a bit off the Mercury-Venus midpoint, but I don't know if you can see this. Let me just make this a bit bigger. See, there's Chiron. It's on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. It's on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint as well. But that colours Chiron in terms of when it was discovered. So Chiron on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, it's about talent. It's about the abilities we have. And, with, Mars didn't show up as being on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, but it's kind of there, not exactly there, but it's pretty close. So it could be about energetically expressing a view, and it is about how we use our talents. And I think that's probably what it is. Mercury-Venus is very artistic. It can be about artistic talents, business talents. It is about talent. So it's about talent and assertiveness. At least that's one view. The wounded healer in that chart, I don't quite get it. Might be. I mean, wounded healer. I'm not convinced. I haven't looked at the chart very long. But anyway, I thought I'd just show you that chart for the Chiron discovery. Although wounded healer, okay, you could go on and on about the 8th house, but I'm not sure about that. So let's just quickly look at a few people who have Chiron prominent Chirons in their chart. Without worrying about the node to begin with. Now, if you're into the occult and you're into magic, there is Aleister Crowley. So Aleister Crowley was a British occultist, born in 1875, and he had a system of magic, which was very focused on sex. His sex magic. He liked to pronounce his magic with a K. He put a K on the end, and when you think that he was active, sort of late 19th century, early 20th century, this would have certainly been quite over the top. Talking about a maverick, a revolutionary, that would certainly fit. Now we've got a time for his chart, and if we take this time, he's got Chiron on the midheaven. So Chiron on the midheaven, that certainly fits, doesn't it? And then, but most importantly, he's got Chiron opposition Venus. So Chiron opposition Venus, for someone who's talking, whose magical system is based on sexuality, is quite sort of revolutionary idea about sexuality. Some would say he's ahead of his times, but I suppose that could be something to do with his own religious upbringing. I mean, his family were quite wealthy. They were Plymouth Brethren. So he came from a very strict religious upbringing. And so perhaps he was rebelling against it. But yeah, he had Venus opposition Chiron. And I think that is reflected perhaps in his system and what he was saying about how people should relate. And of course, his system sort of worships sexuality, and I think he described himself as pansexual. And he was certainly very promiscuous and had lots of wives and mistresses and so forth. And yeah, he was pansexual as well. He was bisexual. He certainly had relationships. He had same-sex relationships. And so that fits. Then, so another person who had Venus opposition Chiron was Wilhelm Reich. Now, Wilhelm Reich was a psychotherapist. He was a medical doctor. He was a psychotherapist. He was originally a disciple of Freud. He was born in 1897. And his system of psychotherapy, he was a very sort of, in some respects, was a very traditional Freudian. I mean, Freud was, I think, was trying to sort of break away from some of the sexual aspects of his theory, as Freud perhaps was trying to become more respectable. But Wilhelm Reich was really into the sexual aspect of the whole thing. I mean, Wilhelm Reich's most famous book was, of course, The Function of the Orgasm. And so Wilhelm Reich very much was a rebel in terms of sexuality, and he did have an opposition between Venus and Chiron. And so I think the fact that Crowley and Wilhelm Reich both had very close oppositions between Venus and Chiron kind of indicates to me that Chiron is starting to is something of a maverick. I think the revolutionary, the rebel, and Wilhelm Reich was a rebel all the way through, and in the end he had some machine. I can't remember the details, but he died in prison, I think, in America, because he would refuse to he fell foul of the Food and Drug Administration by making claims about some machine he had, which he claimed it could heal people. You can look up the details. But yeah, Wilhelm Reich, he was certainly a rebel. Anyone else with Chiron? Well, let's look at, I don't know, I looked at Brigitte Macron, Emmanuel Macron's wife. Remember, she was much older than him. I think she was born in 1953. He was born in 1978. So is that right? I don't know, something like she's 25 years older or something like than him. And she's supposed to be a responsible her drama teacher, his drama teacher or something, and yet she has a relationship with him and marries him. What about her Chiron? You can see that her Chiron there's her Chiron at 20 Capricorn, and it's square Venus. So we've talked about, that's her Venus, that's her, and square Chiron. Do we see any wounding here, or she's actually being quite over the top here? I mean, almost as over the top as Crowley and Reich, having, in the sense of having a relationship with someone 25 years younger than her, and I assume Macron was besotted with her, and it's kind of she took advantage of it, arguably. That's Venus. That might be Venus square Chiron. That's how it's working out, and she has got Chiron is square her Sun Moon midpoint, and so she is representing, she would represent a real Chiron archetype. She is a Chiron woman. So when you see Brigitte Macron, do you see a wounded healer? Or do you see someone who doesn't care, just does what she wants, is a rebel in her own way, but is quite selfish about it? So I think her chart, again, kind of undermines this sort of wounded healer view of Chiron. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to look at Chiron simply from a perspective of Chiron being conjunct the North Node. And the first chart I want to look at is the chart of Andreas Baader, who we have a picture of. So Andreas Baader, his father was an archivist, who I think his father was a fairly academic sort of person, and he fought because Baader was born in 1943 in Munich. So his father fought on the Russian front and disappeared, and you can see that Andreas Baader has a Chiron North Node conjunction. So you could say that Chiron represents how he wants to rebel, but also his future. Remember, North Node is where we should be going. And so if we say where we should be going, then he was, from a young age, he was immediately attracted to rebellion. He saw, when he saw people demonstrating in Berlin and in Frankfurt, he just couldn't help himself. He just immediately got involved with protests, and in the end with revolutionary movements. And from his perspective, Chiron conjunct the North Node, he was arguably doing the right thing. And his Chiron is square the Sun-Moon midpoint. So he has Chiron on the Sun-Moon midpoint. He is a Chiron person. Remember, Charles Harvey's view that, you should always look at the sun, in what he said in The Astrologer, Charles Harvey, in his book Working with Astrology, so you should always look at what's on the Sun-Moon midpoint. So he's got Chiron on the Sun-Moon midpoint, so he should really embody Chiron. So the wounded healer, well, he's actually most famous for being a terrorist, for being a rebel. I think he set fire to a department store in Frankfurt, and then was involved in bank robberies. He was upset by Vietnam. And of course, he became part of the sort of Baader Meinhof gang, the other half being Ulrike Meinhof. She was a journalist. And he shot himself on October the 18th, 1977, just under 2 weeks before Chiron was discovered. And so I think he embodies the Chiron principle. Now, you could go into wounded healer. Well, he was a wounded terrorist in the sense that he shot himself, but I think it's more useful just to see him as a rebel. And Notice, yeah, he's born 1943. So there's a Chiron conjunct North Node in Leo, square the Sun Moon conjunction. So I think that that kind of fits. So let's look at someone else. Well, I suppose there's Joe Biden. Joe Biden is actually born in the same kind of cycle as Andreas Baader. So there's the Chiron. Okay, the North Node is in. They're in different signs. The North Node is in Leo, but so he was born. Yeah, he was born 6 months before Andreas Baader. So is Joe Biden is Joe Biden a rebel? I would say probably not. His Chiron is very closely square his Sun Venus conjunction. So in a way, I'm inviting you to speculate on what that means for Chiron to have be square his Sun Venus conjunction. I think in Joe Biden's case, we perhaps see more of the wound, because obviously Venus square Chiron, his daughter and his wife were killed in a car crash on December the 18th, 1972. And so that may be the wound. You can see how damaged that Venus is. His Venus is conjunct the Sun, and it's square Chiron. I mean, of course, those were not those two women. Well, a girl, his daughter and his wife. That's Venus. There's also, I suppose, the other woman who is famous for damaging is Anita Hill. Anita Hill, during the hearings for the when Clarence Hill was put forward to be a Supreme Court justice, and Anita Hill was had alleged that said that Clarence Hill had behaved inappropriately in a sexual sense towards her, and Biden was aware of this, but he was part of the committee, but he just dismissed what Anita Hill was saying. So you could say that that's Chiron square Venus. He did what he had to do. That's what he felt he had to do. So Chiron is about wounds, and it's perhaps also a bit about there's something a bit unpleasant there with that Chiron square his Venus and his Sun. But I mean, you've got to say, Chiron, he has been wounded, and of course, it wasn't just that. And then more recently, his son Beau Biden died of brain cancer, and Beau Biden. I've got Beau Biden's chart somewhere here. Yeah, if you look at let's look at. I think I've got Biden. So Beau Biden. Oh, here's Beau Biden's chart. We don't have a time of birth for Beau Biden. He was born in Wilmington, Delaware. So there is Beau Biden's chart, and you can see that Beau Biden has a conjunction between Chiron and the North Node. So he's picking up on his father's Chiron node conjunction, and Beau Biden has also got Chiron node and Venus together. Now, you could say that that's more about wounds here. I think I don't think Beau Biden was much of a rebel. Uh, the wound, he died of brain cancer. His mother and his sister were killed in a car accident with him. With the car accident he was involved with. That Chiron is sort of that Chiron is on the first point of Aries. It's a kind of global Chiron. And I think perhaps it is that event, that car accident, that wound is there. And so I would have said, I don't know whether Beau Biden did any healing, but he was certainly wounded. You could associate potentially brain cancer with Aries, because Aries is the head. I mean, possibly. But, medical astrology isn't my particular specialization. But I don't think with Beau Biden we really see much of a rebel. Then we have George Harrison. So George Harrison, born on the same cycle as Joe Biden and Andrea Baader. So he's born February the 25th, 1943. So like Andrea Baader, no, not like Andrea Baader, sorry. He has a Chiron conjunct North Node on the midheaven. How does that manifest? Well, I mean, if you look at his life, I'm not a great expert on George Harrison, but he obviously had a big impact on the Beatles, even though he was known as the quiet Beatle. He was able to introduce new ideas into in particular with sort of Indian music, and he went his own way. He did see things differently. I think the Indian thing. I don't know how this relates to Chiron. It possibly doesn't, but apparently his mother, when she was pregnant with him, would listen to Indian music. There was some radio program of having about Indian stuff, and she'd like to listen to this, and she thought it might be soothing for her child. And clearly, I mean, she seems to have picked up on it. But Chiron conjunct North Node would seem to be not a rebel in a violent way, or an unpleasant way. You can rebel. It's more about doing things differently. More the maverick, with Chiron on the midheaven. I think he passed his 11 plus, which is an exam that people used to take. I don't know, they still take them in Britain. At 11, when to see if you can go to a grammar school. He passed that. He had the capacity to be. He had the capacity to be really well educated. He was well educated, but he left school at 16 because he wanted to get involved in music. So he had a clear idea there. You probably know more about George Harrison than me, but I think that Chiron North Node conjunction, to me it suggests more of a maverick. Okay, I know you could say, well, he died of lung cancer at the age of 58, but I don't think you can just say wounded healer just because he died of lung cancer. I mean, a lot of people died of lung cancer. I wouldn't want to over-interpret that. Yes, he was a heavy smoker, but I wouldn't necessarily want to link that with his Chiron. Oh, one other thing about George Harrison's Chiron, which is important, is that George Harrison's Chiron is not just conjunct with North Node, but you can see that it's on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So whatever Chiron was, it made him attractive and charismatic. So his form of being a maverick, of being a rebel, made him attractive. But that rebel, I don't mean rebel. I must make that clear. Not a rebel in the sense of Andrea Baader. Just it's more of a maverick. His being a maverick made him attractive. added to his appeal. So that's George Harrison's chart. Another, well, not a person actually, an event. An event which is connected with Chiron. This is the Wall Street crash, October the 29th, 1929. This is obviously when Wall Street completely collapsed. I just mentioned yesterday, I was saying that the Valentine's Day massacre happened on February the 14th, 1929, just as Neptune was moving into Virgo. You see, Neptune is in Virgo, but there was a North Node Chiron conjunction at the time of the Wall Street crash, very close, 8-minute orb, in Taurus. What is that about? It's about the way society is supposed to be moving. And is it a wound? It's one hell of a wound, isn't it? Taurus is about money. I don't know whether there's any healing there. It's just about a plain wound. People losing a lot of money, North Node Chiron in Taurus, and having to completely rebuild society, and perhaps in the process having to rediscover the value of money. So that gives us another idea. In that case, I think it's just about a wound and perhaps a lesson, but I don't think there's much healing there in the Wall Street crash. At least not immediately. Moving on to a different cycle. So there was a Chiron North Node conjunction in the early 50s, and so looking at some of people who were born at that time, there was let's see. Oh yeah, we had Oprah Winfrey was born with a Chiron North Node conjunction in Capricorn. I don't know a great deal about Oprah Winfrey, but I suppose you could see in her the maverick, the rebel. You could see. I suppose she would. From what I know about Oprah Winfrey, she would regard herself as being a wounded healer. But certainly the North Node, remember, is the direction forward, the way she's going. So whatever Chiron is for Oprah Winfrey, it's the way she's supposed to be going, her way forward. So I suppose Chiron is in Capricorn, which for her would be, I suppose, about business and career. And Chiron is in her first house, using the Placidus house system. I think that she's had, it's quite a close Chiron North Node conjunction. So maybe for her it would be about having wounds from her childhood, I suppose. That's a bit vague. Where do you actually see it in the chart? I find that a bit vague. I would have said it's more about her doing her own thing in the first house. Chiron is about being a rebel, being a maverick, doing perhaps what is different and unexpected. For her, it seems to work. Another person born in 1954, actually very close to Oprah Winfrey, just a week or two earlier, was Robert Kennedy Jr., who is standing to be president. He was born on January the 17th, 1954. In fact, Robert Kennedy, just noticed he shares the same birthday as Al Capone. So you can see we don't have a time of birth for him, which is really annoying. But he has Chiron conjunct the North Node, and conjunct Venus and maybe the Sun, but really Chiron conjunct the North Node and Venus. I think his destiny, Chiron conjunct the North Node, is certainly to be a rebel and to be a maverick. And looking at him, this is clearly what he has done. He was sort of he was an environmental lawyer, I think. He's been at odds with the system. He's questioned COVID. He's questioned the United States' proxy war against Ukraine. So that is his way forward. And I think that in his case, I think the Chiron North Node again is suggesting the maverick. And so that's quite obvious. Now you could say, oh yeah, but Chiron North Node, his father was shot in 1968. Yes, but I would be wary of reading too much into it. How would that work out? Okay, you could say the Sun is the father. Sun is conjunct the North Node. Sun is conjunct Chiron. So Sun and Chiron are sort of widely conjunct. But I don't know. I don't find that entirely convincing. I think it's enough to say Chiron conjunct North Node, his destiny is to be a rebel, and that's the right thing for him to do. Final chart I want to look at is someone you've probably never heard of. Well, you might have heard of him maybe if you lived in the UK and you were into the sort of New Age spiritual movement. He is someone, he is Stephen Russell, and he went by the name of the Barefoot Doctor. And he wrote quite a few books, and he was an acupuncturist and a healer. And I didn't know him. I didn't know him well. And you can see that for someone who is an acupuncturist and a healer, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you look at his chart, he's got Chiron at 2317 Capricorn, and he's got Jupiter at 2350 Cancer. So here is someone who's got a very close Chiron-Jupiter opposition, and it is square Neptune. So there is a bit of confusion there. Boundaries may get undermined there, perhaps. So the healing. As a healer, he was. He was very effective and incredibly charismatic in London and abroad. I mean, he had a website which a lot of people visited. He was into Tai Chi. He was into all that kind of stuff. And the reason I'm bringing up his chart because I do actually have experience of his healing touch. I remember being really stressed out in 1999, and I went to his clinic in West Hampstead, and he just gave me loads of needles, and it was just completely worked totally. I've had other acupuncturists who had their certificates. He didn't have certificates, to my knowledge, but he just had this natural healing touch. But the most spectacular healing event it was in the mid-90s. I'd been writing his book on astrology, and I was completely stressed out, and I couldn't sleep. And he turned up, and I was in some apartment in Maida Vale, and one of his students was there, a woman who he taught acupuncture, and he told her what to do. He told her to put a needle right between my eyes, and so she put this needle right between my eyes, and so like he was guiding someone who was putting a needle right through my eyes, and straight away I started to feel sick, and then I just completely passed out, and I was completely out cold. And then I finally came round, but my stress had completely gone. The whole problem that I had just completely disappeared. So So this is an example of a healer with his Chiron Jupiter opposition. But as far as the wound is concerned, I mean, I think there was wounds there, and the Maverick and breaking boundaries. And I wonder if breaking boundaries is an aspect to this, because he had a poor sense of boundaries in terms of the opposite sex. When he was a healer, when he was apparently there was I think there was an article in the Guardian about him, because I think he did have a column in the Observer or the Guardian at one time. But there was in 2007 there was an article in the Guardian about him having inappropriate relations with some of his female clients, and I suppose from a professional perspective that damaged his reputation. Okay, you might say that's because he's got a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Scorpio, but I'm saying it's not because I'm just trying to do him down or anything. He was an incredible healer. He's now died. He died in 2020, and I'll be talking about his death chart in a moment. But that may be the wound, and there may be with that Chiron opposition Jupiter. I mean, Jupiter can be about inappropriate relationships in a sense. If you take the Zeus archetypal idea of Jupiter, strong Jupiter in Cancer, conjunct Uranus. But there's something perhaps archetypal about that. Maybe he was trying to be the Jupiter figure. And it's square Neptune. It's all perhaps rather inappropriate there. Although one could say, well, Venus is not actually involved with Chiron. The moon he's got a moon sextile Chiron. But that might be another way in which Chiron is working out, and I suppose that perhaps relates to what I was saying about Brigitte Macron's chart. Although in his now, as far as the North Node is concerned, Stephen Russell kind of had a conjunction between Chiron and a North Node. You see, there is Chiron, there is the North Node. It's 10 degrees out, so it's not working as exactly as with the other charts, like George Harrison and sort of Oprah Winfrey having these close conjunctions. But I thought Stephen Russell's chart was the Barefoot Doctor's chart was quite good in terms of showing how Chiron was worked, and then we get further evidence perhaps of how that Chiron is working when we think that he died at the age of 65 in Spain. And so here is his death. This is a chart for when he died. So let's have a look at put them together. So you see, there is his Chiron at Jupiter at 2317. Now, I would have argued that as a healer, and he really was a healer, he may have been a flawed healer, but he certainly was a very powerful healer. He did have the touch. A lot of people claim to be healers, and they're not healers, but he had the touch. You can see that Pluto was almost exactly conjunct his Chiron, and there was actually a Saturn-Pluto conjunction on his Chiron, and I believe Moon, Saturn, and Pluto were all conjunct his Chiron. And therefore opposition his Jupiter-Uranus. So that you can see his death, that was the death of the healer. And so I thought that worked quite well. So yeah, I just wanted to in this video talk about Chiron with particular reference to Jupiter conjunct Chiron. I mean, I think there's a little bit of evidence that Chiron can be the wounded healer. I mean, I think Stephen Russell, the Barefoot Doctor, as I've just tried to demonstrate, he was certainly a healer, and he had a very close Jupiter-Chiron opposition. But in many cases, I take the view that Chiron is not really about healing. It's about being a rebel, and in some cases, being quite a violent rebel, as was the case with Andreas Baader, who had who had Chiron conjunct his North Node, and also he had Chiron square the Sun-Moon midpoint. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting and useful. If you did, I'd be grateful if you like this video. If you are not subscribed and you like this video, I would of course be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.